In late 1987, the Long Range Surveillance Detachment was established at the 24th Infantry Division and attached as Delta Company, 124th Military Intelligence Battalion. The new commander, first sergeant, and some of the new team leader and assistant team leader members were away at the Long Range Surveillance Leaders Course at Fort Benning, Georgia. In January 1988, a group of 12 new soldiers, all having recently graduated from the U.S. Army Airborne School, arrived at the 23rd Replacement Center at Fort Stewart, Georgia. After a formation one afternoon, an announcement was made for all of the airborne qualified personnel to stay after formation. They were greeted by a young sergeant from the new Long Range Surveillance Unit, and they were asked for any volunteers to serve in the unit. All 12 of the new soldiers raised their hands and volunteered. They later called themselves the Dirty Dozen. The new Dirty Dozen airborne soldiers were assigned rooms in the barracks and were soon met with the commander, sergeants, and specialists returning from the LRS course. Imagine their shock when they found out that all of their leadership had come from the 175th Ranger Battalion. These impressive leaders were very intimidating. They wore many awards and badges on their uniforms, such as Airborne Wings, Jumpmaster Wings, Expert Infantryman badges, Pathfinder badges, Combat Infantryman's badges, Combat Unit patches, and they all had Ranger tabs. The fledgling unit began intense training that included Ranger operations, patrolling, Pathfinder operations, air assault operations, reconnaissance and surveillance operations, helicopter insertions and extractions, and much more. The new volunteer soldiers were exposed to some high-level training that they could not have predicted. Training was often conducted at the National Training Center, or NTC, at Fort Irwin, California, in the Mojave Desert. The unit would use Beacon Hill as their tactical operations center, where they set up communications and conducted mission planning. The unit also trained extensively in the woods and swamps of Georgia when they were in garrison, sometimes even working with the mechanized infantry. By 1989 through 1990, the LRS unit continued to train, and they were also able to send some folks to various schools such as Ranger School, SEER School, Sniper School, as well as the Long Range Surveillance Leadership Course. The unit was reassigned from the MI Battalion over to the 2nd of the 4th CAV and were designated as F Troop. This was an interesting time of transition for the unit when the 24th Infantry Division changed command over to General McCaffrey. The unit was moved back to its original home with the 124th MI Battalion as Delta Company again. The General visited the LRS unit at NTC in the spring of 1990 and spoke to them, warning them of a future conflict that we would likely be engaged in. He didn't say when or where, just that something was coming. In August of 1990, the LRS unit went on alert and then loaded up on planes at Hunter Army Airfield and deployed to the Persian Gulf for Desert Shield. Once the Long Range Surveillance Detachment was in country, they left the entry port and drove into the desert to set up their Tactical Operations Center. The team started to do reconnaissance flights and gear up for their future missions. Their basic team loadout consisted on average of M16A2, M203, light anti-tank weapon, claymore mines, fragmentation grenades, smoke grenades, thermite grenades for destroying sensitive equipment, if compromised, communications gear, and 9mm Berettas with sound suppressors. Team members were also issued blood chits to carry during missions. U.S. News and World Report did an article on the unit and called it "The Spies in the Sand Far Behind Enemy Lines," in which several members were interviewed about the mission and current circumstances. The teams did still manage to have some fun during down times, to include a King of the Hill / promotion ceremony on a very large sand dune. They even adopted a local dog to feed and take care of. Once the air war was on in earnest, the unit was picking up their op tempo and doing lots of training missions. General Norman Schwarzkopf made a visit and met with teams and leaders to report the current and future situation. Soon after, the team moved out with all of their equipment to advance north of the ground war. This became known as Desert Storm. Several teams conducted live missions, and unit members also came across quite a few surrendering Iraqi soldiers who became POWs. Once the ground war was complete, a ceasefire was called, and the war was basically over, and soon after, the unit headed home.